Hello, thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to speak with you. And for introductions, I'm Priyanka, and I'm a rising junior in high school. And I've participated in MSF for about a year now.
Hi, my name is Anne. I'm the other interviewer. I am a rising senior in high school, and this is my second year participating in MSF. And I'll turn it over to Mark. If you could just give us a quick introduction, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. So my name's Mark Landergan. I participated in MSF for 2 years back in high school, 2014 and 2015.
Thank you for being here. And as you've said, you've been a dedicated participant in MSF for about 2 years now. And could you talk a little bit more about your MSF projects and what you learned from those experiences?
Yeah, sure. So my first project in 2014, I built a teachable robotic arm. And so the project was a 6 degree of freedom robotic arm that could be taught by anyone, basic movements. And the second project in 2015, so my senior year, I built a cost-effective prosthetic hand. So this was a 3D printed prosthetic hand that was controlled by a user's forearms through myoelectric sensors. And for these projects, the biggest thing that I learned, at least for the first project, was that robotics is very challenging, yet very rewarding at the same time. So for the first project, it was actually one of my first times programming a robot. And so I was able to learn the basics about programming and C, C++. And it taught me that developing software can be pretty frustrating at times, but if you stick with it, you can always get through it and improve. And then for the prosthetic hand project, I learned that time management and proper planning is crucial to the success of a project. I spent a little bit too much time focusing on the electrical and the software side of things, and I delayed the construction of the physical hand towards the end of the project. And as a result, the hand was only partially functioning by the time of the competition. So going forward from that project, I was able to learn that time management and proper scheduling is really key to any success of a project.
I feel like that's really helpful for the viewers. Sounds like you learned a lot from MSF, and it seems like that really solidified your pathway in your career and your interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously from MSF, you've come a long way. So would you be able to describe the kind of educational journey that you were able to take? How did you get from MSF to where you are now? Kind of the college admissions process, what you looked into while you were applying, all of that.
Yeah, sure. So I went to high school in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And after the MSF experience, it really solidified my passion for robotics. And so I wanted to become an engineer. And so I looked at different universities in Mass and across the East Coast. And I was particularly attracted to WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's a private university in Worcester, Mass. And I liked it because it had robotics engineering as a specific degree, which is a multidisciplinary degree of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science. And so, I took the SATs and applied to a lot of different schools, but I ended up going to WPI. And interestingly enough, I got in through their projects application. So you can submit either your SATs and your grades or a portfolio project and your school grades. So I was able to, document my MSF experiences and some other personal robotics projects, which actually helped me get into the university. Then I attended WPI for 4 years and got my bachelor degree in robotics engineering. And then throughout the college experience, I did a number of internships with different companies. 2 summers, I worked at a company called Draper Labs in Cambridge, Mass, working on autonomous cars. And then my senior year, I worked at a startup in California, which is where I ended up working full-time after college. So I moved out to California. And more recently, I just switched jobs during the pandemic, but I'm working as a software engineer for mobile robotics.
That's a really interesting journey, and it's very cool that you were able to travel and you were able to pursue your passion, which is robotics engineering, throughout MSF to where you are now. I think that's really cool, and it must have been a great experience. And talking more about the things that you've done, you know, like your internships and the jobs that you've worked at. Has there ever been an example, something like there was just a moment where you felt like, wow, I learned this back in MSF and this is helping me now? Has there been ever a moment where something you learned from MSF has helped you in your career or your educational journey?
Yeah, so first and foremost, the perseverance. And so I'm sure, as you guys know, working on any project can be frustrating at times. So just building up the confidence to, keep pushing through and asking for help when you need it. But specifically from MSF, I was able to really sharpen my presentation skills. So specifically how to present on technical concepts to people that, may not necessarily understand the depths of it. And that skill has proven very valuable throughout college and my professional career. So talking with various coworkers and explaining different concepts, or even other groups and other teams. And yeah, I can definitely attribute that to at least starting out with MSF when I was presenting on my different projects.
And in your current life, like in your work day, what is a kind of a general description of a day in your life? What goes on?
Yeah, I thought this was a fun one. So with the pandemic, so I'm working mostly remote. Some days I go into the office, but I, open my laptop and I'm writing software. So writing code for these mobile robots that drive around factories. And so it's mostly writing software, debugging problems, working with coworkers and collaborating on different ideas. And then some days when I do go into the office, I'll be actually testing my software on physical robots. So having them drive around the lab and test different functionality. Also have meetings, and just presenting on what's going on.
All that sounds very cool. And kind of segueing off of that, you're working with software and robotics on a daily basis. So I assume that there must be a lot of challenges coming along with that, especially considering your field. And how has MSF shaped the way that you saw these challenges, and what challenges have you faced along your educational journey so far?
Yeah, great question. So throughout college and my professional career, it's pretty easy to get overwhelmed. So, trying to balance various priorities, different tasks at work or in college. I competed, I ran cross country and track. So I was balancing that with the coursework. And so, yeah, just being overwhelmed with things. And one thing that I learned was to try and prioritize my work and make lists and try and stick with those plans. And so I think that's, going back to that prosthetic hand project, that was one lesson that I learned was, I need to be more on top with time management. And so that's a skill that led into college and in my professional career. So just taking copious notes, checking off a checklist, and just trying to stay on top of things. Also in college, some of these classes are just very challenging, if you pursue STEM. And one thing that I learned was when I had I couldn't figure out a concept or a problem, I really leaned in on my friends in a study group. So working alongside your peers that are in the same class and trying to figure it out together. So teaching each other things that well, but maybe your friend doesn't know well. But then also not being afraid to ask for help. So reaching out to your professor, guidance counselors, or TAs. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask. There's no shame in getting help. So yeah, that's my overall advice that I would have for college.
I think that's great advice, considering that a lot of the viewers will probably be going into college in the coming years. And I think now we can go on to the kind of unscripted part of it. From
Sure.
what you said that you had worked in California. So I was wondering, what is the difference in kind of work culture from
Yeah, it's a
there
great
and
question.
here?
Yeah, so like I said, I worked at Draper Labs in Cambridge, Mass. And I like to think this is a little bit more old school engineering. So you have to dress up, show up on time, be very structured, and clock in, clock out. And it's fun. I think that's kind of also like an East Coast mentality. But then going from that to a startup, especially working in software, I kind of kept that same mentality that I had. So showing up early, dressing nice. But there was plenty of engineers and software people that would like roll in at 10 a.m., just wearing a t-shirt and, work really late at night. And so it's just like a very different work style. And sometimes it works well for people, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, the different time management, which is interesting, but also in some parts, the work culture is pretty intense in terms of some people work very long hours, and it's not necessarily the norm, but yeah, people are very dedicated. I'll put it that way. Does that make sense?
It sounds like you've had an amazing work experience. And I wanted to ask, is there something that inspired you to study robotics engineering?
Yeah, great question. So back when I was 12 years old, my dad brought my brothers and I to watch Star Wars. And I know it's a little cliche, but I saw C-3PO and R2-D2, as I'm sure you guys have. And I just was like fascinated. And, obviously it's fictional, but at the time I was like, this is so freaking cool. Like this robot's driving around, making noises and it's smart. And so I was inspired to just learn more about robotics. And that kind of kickstarted my passion and interest. And then in high school, I started learning on my own. There's a lot of information on the internet that you can really pick up. And so I kind of became fixated on creating intelligent robotics. So making robots that can make, educated decisions. So that's kind of where it started, and, doing Legos and all that stuff. So yeah, I think that's roughly how it went.
And then my next question was going to be, if you could kind of think back and you could change anything, maybe in your educational pathway or something that you did with your career, is there anything that you wish you would have done differently?
Maybe try and start programming when I was younger. I know that's it's kind of funny to say, but just like the more practice you get, the better, like over time. In terms of my college experience, it was pretty rigid in terms of what classes I had to take for my major. And one thing I wish I did was actually take some classes outside of my domain. So like instead of doing engineering classes, take a political science course or, an art class, and just kind of have that like diverse perspective on things, because I think engineers are very particular in their mindset. So not being like too rigid on one path, but being a little bit more open-minded to other avenues as well.
Definitely. And I was wondering, you did mention that you worked at a startup. So could you talk a little bit more about that, your experience with working in a startup?
Yeah. So I did my internship at this startup before going into my senior year of college. And I primarily wanted to just get a feel for if I liked California and the Bay Area, because I've never been out there. And it was like a lot of fun. I had two of my college friends also do internships in the Bay Area at some big tech companies. So we all lived together. And working at the startup professionally, it was a little hectic at times, but I really enjoyed it because since it was a little more loose in terms of like the structure of things, once I proved, I could solve these problems and do fairly good work, they gave me a pretty good leniency on what stuff I would be doing. So primarily when you like just get started out of college, they don't really trust you with like the cool work per se. That's not the case at all companies, but for the most part. But with the startup, just due to the sheer pace of things, they need like all hands on deck, and you have to wear different hats. So, debugging the physical robot. So making sure like, oh, is everything connected correctly? Or, working on the path planning algorithm. It was really cool just getting that like various aspects all at the same time. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, but it's not for everyone. It can be a little fast paced. And so another cool thing with WPI and part of the college experience is I was able to study abroad for 1 term. So a term is like half a semester for other schools. And I actually got to work with a team of Moroccan engineering students.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was a team of WPI students, including myself, and we worked with them remotely for a term, and then went there for 7 weeks and worked, in collaboration with them on a local project. So they were trying to make their transportation smarter, so like IoT devices. And it was an amazing experience. I picked Morocco specifically because it's very different than the United States or Europe in that it's a predominantly Arabic country, and language is different, the culture is different, but it was really awesome connecting with other engineering students there. Like one of them was a robotics student that I met in the dining hall, and we were able to like collaborate and just talk, and it was just a really unique and cool experience. So if you guys go to college and have the opportunity to study abroad, I highly recommend it, and try and go somewhere that's outside your comfort zone, because it's a really, really great educational experience.
Yeah, I agree. I've heard a lot of really good things about abroad programs at universities.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
Yeah, and the Morocco experience sounds really exciting, and it's definitely going to be helpful for a lot of our viewers to watch as well, because they're learning about getting into college, and now they know that things like that are available to them. And I wanted to ask, what's the most interesting thing that you've worked on so far in your journey?
Okay, it's a tough question. I'd have to say the autonomous car at Draper Labs. So this was 2 summer internships. It was just really cool. So I'm really interested with mobile robots, so robots that drive around. And pretty much the biggest mobile robot you could work on is a self-driving car. And I was just kind of enamored with the scale and complexity of the problem. We all can drive fairly easily. You take your lessons, as you're growing up, but to actually like program that is an extremely challenging concept. Yeah, it was just a really cool experience. Yeah.
And I had, so is there a specific teacher or professor that you've had that was like the best teacher or professor that really solidified your interest and really inspired you to kind of keep going in this field?
Yeah, so in high school, I had a teacher, her name was Miss Ledbeater, and she was the like STEM teacher for Newburyport. And she was fantastic. She has like an industrial engineering background, but I was really interested in robotics, and she didn't have experience with robotics, but she was open to learning. And so with her help, she started a robotics class in an after school program. And she really went out of her way to make sure there was like great opportunities for what everyone was interested in. And so that was just awesome, having that like rock and having someone that's like on your side and rooting for you. Like I'm still in touch with her today, even though I've graduated high school like all these years ago. And so just having people like that is just really inspiring, because they make your high school years just so much better and so much more, I don't know, inspired.
Yeah, I agree. I've definitely had teachers like that too so far. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a professor in college. I'm blanking on his name, so I'm really bad. But he was one of my calculus teachers, and you kind of assume engineers are good at math, right? But I actually I wasn't that good at math, and it was something I struggled with. And this one professor did like after hours, like professor hours, and he would sit there with me and explain and walk through the problems, one by one for like over an hour. And it was well longer than, what you're allotted. And he was very patient, very kind, wasn't like rude, because unfortunately, you're going to get some professors who are just kind of brash, and that's just the nature of things. But if you find a good one, definitely stick with them. And so this professor made me really enjoy math, and feel a little bit more confident with it. And so, yeah, that was really awesome as well.
So I just wanted to ask, I know you mentioned, so many people assume engineers are good at math. That led right into my question. I wanted to ask you, are there any myths about robotics or engineering that you would like to debunk here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, it's not just a guy thing. I think that thankfully it's getting better, in terms of inclusion for not only, all types of people. And another myth that, yeah, basically anyone can do it really. If you put your mind to it and you work, you have that drive, then you can solve the problem. In terms of like broader myths about robotics, I think the layman person or someone that's not involved with STEM, they kind of assume that robots are much smarter than they actually are. And so at Bossa Nova, we made robots that drive around supermarkets to do live inventory of the products. So one of which our robots was in Walmarts across the country, which was really cool to see in action. But people would go up and, ask the robot questions like, hey, where's the ketchup? And it's like, that's not what the robot does. It just scans the aisles. So yeah, I think the perception is that it's much smarter than it is. And then, actually working on it, that's the goal. But in reality, it's pretty dumb.
That's really funny. Let's see, what else can I ask?
I have a question for you guys. Is that okay?
Or yeah, go for it.
So what areas are you guys interested in, and what are you hoping to do, in college or after college?
Do you want me to go first? I can go first if you don't have an answer yet.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to senior year, so spent a lot of time thinking about this. So I'm looking into biomedical engineering and possibly minoring in business. So yeah.
Awesome.
Going into like corporate biotech is kind of
That's
what I'm
great.
looking into. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Biotech has always been really interesting for me. So good luck with that.
Thank
That's
you.
pretty And I haven't solidified yet. I'm deciding between neuroscience, possibly clinical research, academia, and then psychiatry.
Sweet. A lot of great ideas. I like it. All great things. So I'm sure you guys will do great at them too. So this isn't really a question, but another advice I was thinking about when you guys were questioning me, is just to have fun and take things lightly. I think as participants in the science fair, it's always great to strive for excellence and to try and be the best that you can be. And I think that's like a pretty common attribute among science fair students. But it's also important to not take things too seriously, right? We're all young. We're all, should enjoy ourselves, and make sure that, yeah, we're having a fun time. So I just want to put that out there to all the students.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. Thank you so much for joining us. It'll be definitely really helpful for all our viewers. So thank you so much.